And now I can stop talking. So I have known our next speaker for nearly 10 years. She's the welcoming happy face when you attend Brighton Ruby. We've been to multiple Ruby and Rails comps together, and as the token Brits, we sort of tend to hang out together, sit at the front, and sort of affirm and support each other as we talk nonsense with a microphone. Plus, we bicker like an old married couple when we're at conferences. We first met in 2013 when I was invited for drinks with a guy called JB who was opening the Pivotal Labs office in London. And I met this ferociously intelligent young woman who had just finished Makers Academy, which is one of the London-based boot camps. So I sidled up to JB and I said, "She's amazing. I would love to hire her. I think she'd be really, really great to work with." And JB smiled and said, "I already have." Damn it. And so I've never had the chance to work with her. And post-Pivotal Labs, she's been doing her own stuff, which you'll hear about soon. So Nadia is a proud Rubyist, a podcaster, a dancer, an ambitious entrepreneur taking on Amazon pretty much single-handed. And most importantly, and fortunately for me, my friend, and now your keynote speaker, Nadia Odunayo.
Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be keynoting RubyConf Mini. Thank you, Gemma, Emily, and Andy for having me do this. And thank you for the lovely introduction, Andy. So I'm Nadia Odunayo. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called The Story Graph. Thanks. A reading tracker and book recommendations app. We help you to choose your next book based on your mood and your favorite topics and themes. We've got a whole range of stats where you can learn about your reading habits and see how they develop over time. We've got machine learning-powered personalized recommendations. It's like a trusted go-to friend who knows your preferences, but whose brain is also a book encyclopedia. You can find your next perfect read by filtering lists of books by mood, pace, fiction versus non-fiction, genre, book size, and more. You can also read alongside friends, adding live reactions to specific parts of the book, and the comments remain locked until your friends reach that specific part in their reading. And there's a whole lot more on offer. We have 3 million unique monthly visitors, 36 million page views a month, and each month we serve 110 million requests. People often ask, what is StoryGraph built in? And I love that I can say good old Ruby on Rails. And with all of the website and app activity, we get a lot of customer feedback, feature requests, and bug reports. Given that I run the company's Instagram and Twitter accounts, I'll often receive messages that include something like, "If you could pass this on to your dev team, that would be great." Now, while I have an absolutely awesome co-founder in Rob Freelo, the web and app dev team is made up of just me. In fact, I recently gave a talk at the inaugural RailsSASS conference run by Andrew Culver, held in LA last month. My talk was titled, "Getting to 1 million users as a one-woman dev team." I spoke about the ups and downs in building StoryGraph, and there were some real stressful moments in this journey, some real dark times where I felt stuck, where I questioned whether I could keep going. And as the talk blurb says, it was a personal, intimate story. But I saved the real intimate details for the RubyConf Mini audience. I have a secret. Don't tell anybody. You see, despite all of the focus, hard work, and stress that went into building StoryGraph into what it is today, I couldn't help but keep up a little side gig. I'm not just the founder, CEO, and sole developer of the StoryGraph. I'm also a private investigator. And what is it I investigate, you ask? Ruby crimes. Not jewel theft. I investigate crimes and mysteries relating to our favorite programming language. Why go into private investigating? Well, there'd been rumors circulating of a shady mastermind causing havoc and confusion amongst Ruby developers worldwide with his constant meddling in the source code. I wanted to be the one to put a stop to him. Oh, and I'm sure all of us know just how lucrative the world of Ruby private investigating is. I decided that I couldn't do this side gig under my normal name. No, I needed to protect my identity. So I decided to call my Ruby private investigating alter ego Deirdre Bug, D for short. Why? Well, isn't it rather obvious? Now, I've got several stories from my years of doing this work. But for today's keynote, I thought I should tell you all about a case that happened within the very walls of one of our community's most revered, beloved institutions. This is the case of the vanished variable. Chapter 1. It was June of last year. I'd had an incredibly stressful couple of days at Storygraph. Rob and I had just finished dealing with our first experience of serious online controversy around our product. Our content warnings feature came under fire after a series of well-known authors brought to light that inaccurate warnings were being attached to their books. Things were going wild on Twitter. Rob and I stayed calm and mollified the Twitter situation before coming up with a proposal for adjusting our system. We sought feedback from the community, and after our ideas were received positively, I coded all day and night to implement the changes. It was a wild and stressful time, but we pulled through. Being the sole software developer, though, this had really wiped me out. Despite knowing that it wasn't the case, I'd felt personally attacked in all of this. I needed a break from Storygraph. And I was in the process of planning a relaxed evening when the phone rang. Immediately upon answering, I heard a breathless, anxious voice say, "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need your help." Oh, I recognized that voice. How could I forget it? Jenny. Who's Jenny, some of you may be wondering. She was 29, a seasoned Ruby developer who was obsessed with all things Rails. She also betrayed her best friend during one of my earlier cases by giving him faulty information about how Ruby method lookup worked. I'd heard through the grapevine that she'd learned the error of her ways and was on a good path now, but I was hesitant to trust her. Jenny worked for the famous, world-renowned Ruby Institute of Professionals, the organization whose whole reason for existing was to see to it that the Ruby language and community stayed alive and kicking forever. Slightly unfortunate logo. Anyway, it was a job-related issue that had Jenny calling me that day. You see, the RIP had started up this new internal incubator, a competition of sorts, all within the organization's aim of improving Ruby's image and usage worldwide. People within the organization could get into teams and submit various startup ideas. The winning team would win a $500,000 investment and the opportunity to work on their startup full-time, fully supported by the RIP. And for the very first round of this, Jenny's team had made it into the final two. We're building a platform that assigns grants from a pool of money that the RIP has available for this kind of thing. They'd go to fund Ruby developers and organizations. There are 3 different types of award on offer that vary in grant size and can go towards different types of projects. For our demo, we simulate an automated draw for the grants, including doing multiple redraws until the maximum number of grants has been assigned. But the number of awarded grants came out incorrectly in the semi-final today, which was embarrassing. We thought we'd be out, but the judges put us through. It's so close between the final 2 teams that the judges will be looking for any reason to disqualify one of us. But here's the problem, and Jenny sighs heavily at this point. Our lead dev, Alex, is now very stressed, and he won't admit that he needs a second pair of eyes. We're the only 2 devs on the team, and not only do I have other jobs to get on with, I really hate working with him. The final is tomorrow, and there's only a few hours left to get to the bottom of this. We need you, he finished. I was quiet while I thought about it. Not only was I wary of helping Jenny out, knowing her dishonest past, after my incredibly stressful couple of days at Storygraph, I was meant to be relaxing. But well, Debug can never resist a challenge. And it's never a good idea to pass up an opportunity to go into the RIP. After all, I was sure they'd pay me handsomely for my work. I agreed to take on the case. Chapter 2. I don't need help, Alex said bluntly, after listening to Jenny's explanation of why I was there. He sat in his office chair with his arms crossed, a mix between sulking and glaring. Jenny started to protest, but I had an idea. I'd dealt with this type several times before. You know, the self-proclaimed 10x hero developer who knew everything and declared that they could solve all of the company's problems in an afternoon if only people would leave them alone. I knew what would loosen him up a little. I'll tell you what, Alex, I said. I won't distract you. I won't say much. I won't touch the keyboard. I'll just sit next to you and be your rubber duck. You can just talk me through the code and the bug, bounce ideas off of me. Of course, you'll find the solution by yourself and you'll get all the credit. But this way, you'll find the bug quicker. And time is of the essence. We're all silent while Alex thinks about it, frowning, before finally saying, fine. Alex had already turned back to his keyboard as Jenny gave me a subtle, triumphant fist pump and says she'll leave us to it. As I go to take my seat next to Alex, though, he brusquely puts an arm out to stop me. I just realized that I can't show you the code base as is, he says. There's confidential code in here from some of RIP's clients and partners. Let me get rid of it. I was wary that a couple of hours had already passed since Jenny's call, but I couldn't really argue with the issue of me seeing potentially sensitive client information. So I instead pulled up a chair a couple seats down from Alex. I decided to make the best use of my time by opening up Duolingo. After all, there was no way I was going to take down the shady mastermind if I didn't stay on top of my Japanese, right? 40 minutes later, and Alex is finally ready to show me the code. Now, I'm only showing you a simplified version of what I saw that day. First, each award type had its own file that looked like this. Here, Alex had defined a class named Award A, which inherited from another class called Grant. Then there was a class instance variable called award count, which was set to 0. There was a class method, also called award count, which returned the value of the class instance variable. Then there was a method called assign, which incremented the award count class instance variable by 1. And Alex quickly showed me how the files of the other 2 award types were exactly the same, except for a change in class name. And then there was the grant class itself. There was a constant called max grants, which was set to 100. The grant class had its own award count class instance variable, which didn't seem to be being used anywhere. The grant class also had its own award count class method, which added up the award count on all 3 award types. Then there was an awards remaining class method, which was used in the redraw to figure out how many awards still needed to be assigned. It took the maximum number of grants permitted and subtracted the number of awards that had already been given out. Then there were scripts that assigned some awards. 50 lots of award A, 30 lots of award B, and 20 lots of award C. And finally, a script that checked how many prizes were left and then performed a redraw if necessary. So remember, in the code Alex showed me, there were a maximum of 100 grants that could be awarded, and 50 plus 30 plus 20 equals 100, which equals the maximum number of grants that were available. Are you following so far, or do you need me to go over it again? Alex asked. No, I got it, I told him. If anything, I'd been holding back from suggesting places where his code could have done with some improvements. I mean, that wasn't normally my style. Usually, I just focus on the problem at hand and avoid making quick judgments about the quality of unfamiliar code bases. But Alex's behavior was frustrating. Anyway, on the whole, his code looked straightforward. I couldn't see what could go wrong. Alex ran the scripts. What? 300 grants awarded? Maximum number of grants exceeded? What a mystery. Chapter 3. I spent a few moments feeling baffled before I remembered that I was the great Debug, a private investigator. I had to stay calm and focused. And I had to play my cards with Alex carefully. He seemed to be opening up to me. So my strategy was to let him keep driving and to slowly nudge him into what would hopefully turn out to be the right direction. Something had stuck out to me during the code demo: the class instance variables. Now, I thought that class instance variables belonged to one specific class only, but the 4 classes all had one with the same name. Given that the 3 award classes all inherited from grant, and we had 3 times as many awards being assigned, I wondered if some overwriting was occurring. What if, I said cautiously to Alex, each class were to have a differently named class instance variable? Perhaps they're all conflicting with one another. Alex glared at his display as if he hadn't heard me. But then he shrugged and said, sure, we can try that. And so he took each award class and adapted the name of their class instance variable to include some reference to its type, like so. He then ran the program again. Same result. So it wasn't the fact that the class instance variables with the same name in one inheritance chain were interfering with one another. They did, in fact, as I'd understood, stick to their own classes. I was wondering what to suggest next when we were interrupted by one of Alex's colleagues. Alex, he said, you'll never guess who's in the office. We both turned up to look at him. Maths. 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 Everybody loved him, but I knew different. I knew he was not to be trusted. But in that moment, his appearance worked in my favor because the way Alex jumped up and sprinted away from the computer towards wherever Matt's was, you'd think he'd heard that somebody had dropped $1 billion on the floor and the first person to pick it up got to keep it. But I didn't care, because finally I could get my hands on the keyboard. Alex's fancy, clacky keyboard with no labels on the keycaps didn't faze me. Oh no. Now, I could finally do what I did best: solve this mystery. While I mull over what to try, I immediately, out of habit, because of my excellent Git hygiene, if I do say so myself, type git status into the terminal. There are changes in the repo, so I type in git diff, and I'm casually looking over the output before it hits me, oops, I probably shouldn't be looking at this. There might be client data in here that the RIP don't want me to see. And so I quickly exit, but not before something catches my eye. 151 lines added to this simple script that Alex had created to demonstrate the bug. But the file that we had been looking at had only been a few lines long. I quickly tabbed over to the file in question, hit Command and the down arrow to jump to the bottom of the file, and this is what I see. The grant class had been reopened. The class instance variable award count had been overwritten to be 300, and the class method now read from the class instance variable directly. No wonder the "what are you looking at?" Alex had returned and wasn't too happy to see me sitting in his chair touching his keyboard. He looks over my shoulder at the screen and sees what I'm looking at. He looked a little alarmed at first, before confusion took over. Where did you get my old code from?" he asks suspiciously. "That's from an old demo." "Well, it was right at the bottom of this file," I say. And all of a sudden, Alex starts to look incredibly embarrassed, like he wants the ground to swallow him up. He explains how when he was getting the repo ready for me, he'd been making quick edits, copied and pasted a bunch of code from one place to the next by selecting the whole file, then deleting whole swathes of it, and must not have noticed this bit of code being left behind in his haste. "But," I say, "this code must have been hanging around for a while. Surely you would have noticed it unless you never do partial commits." Now, copy and paste errors can happen to the best of us. I've certainly been caught out by them before. I have to admit, though, after his behavior throughout the day, it was rather nice seeing Alex humbled a bit. But, however trivial the bug, a case isn't over until I see the code working. And so I deleted the code from the bottom of the script and ran the program again. While it didn't end up being a meaty problem to sink my teeth into and distract me from my stressful storygraph situation, the case was closed, my work here was done. Chapter 4. I was on my way out of the RIP building when I hear someone call my name. It's Jenny. "I've just heard from Alex that the two of you have figured out what the issue is," she says. "He's gone off to go and implement the changes." Now, I'm not the told you so type, but it was the class variables, wasn't it? I knew that him using them was a bad idea. "You mean class instance variables?" I say. "No, class variables," says Jenny. "You don't mean class instance variables?" I ask. "Because there wasn't a single class variable in sight, Jenny, only class instance variables." And I don't much like the expression that Jenny starts to give me. "Do you have time to come back upstairs, please?" she asks. I nod. I want to get to the bottom of this confusion. We head to her desk, where she starts to fetch the latest code from GitHub. And I tell her to be careful so that I don't see any confidential code. And she says, "What? There's nothing confidential in here. We started up a whole new code base for this project." And now it's my turn to raise my eyebrow. But it's not long before the expression on my face turns into one of shock, because Jenny is now showing me the code. And it looks exactly the same as the code that Alex showed me, except for the fact that all of the class instance variables in the award classes are in fact class variables. And the grant class no longer has its class instance variable. Apart from that, it looked the same. "Let's run the code," I say. Okay, so it still works, but hey, check this out, I say to Jenny, pointing at something in the web browser tab that's visible behind the terminal. Alex had made a commit 14 minutes ago. It was a one-line change. He'd removed a line from the grant class. So before his last commit, the grant class, instead of looking like this, looked like this. The grant class also had a class variable. "Let's run this code," I say. I had my suspicions. And my suspicions were proven correct. This code failed in exactly the same way as the earlier bug that Alex had presented to me. And now I'm really confused. So there was in fact a bug, but Alex knew how to fix it all along, but didn't tell his teammates, and then gave me a fake problem to solve when I came in? Let's go and find Alex and get to the bottom of this, Jenny suggests. It's past 8 p.m., and there's hardly anybody left in the office. Alex is not at his desk, he's not in the kitchen, he's not playing ping pong. Max is gone, so we know he's not somewhere fawning over him. I spot the colleague who'd come over earlier. We ask if he's seen Alex anywhere. I just saw him. He was trying to find a quiet corner to take a personal call. We hurried off in the rough direction the colleague gestured to, planning to grab Alex as soon as he came off the phone. And we were about to turn a corner when we heard snatches of hushed dialogue. Zoe, they almost caught me. Even brought in a private investigator. Faked some code for fun and to buy time. Jenny will be nosy, so I fixed the real code for now. But don't worry, honey. I'll put the bug back in before the final tomorrow. My eyes widened. Jenny gaped at me. Before we rounded the corner to confront Alex, and then it was his turn to look absolutely mortified. Chapter 5. It's 2 hours later, and I'm sitting with Jenny at her desk, thinking over everything that I managed to piece together after my interrogation of Alex. So, Alex is dating another of your colleagues, Zoe, and Zoe is in the team competing with yours for the final $500,000 prize. At some point throughout this whole thing, Alex became fed up with your team and your idea, much prefers Zoe's team's idea, which he had a hand in coming up with, and he wants them to win so that he can go and work on that team alongside his girlfriend, and so he set out to sabotage his own team by introducing a bug to the code, but anybody who had a chance to look at the code would have immediately suspected the class variables, and so he sent me on a wild goose chase in a bid to waste time instead? Yup. Wow. So much Ruby drama. Here I was trying to escape drama in my day job, and instead I ended up in yet another mess during my side gig. I said goodbye to Jenny and headed home, knowing that despite the hour, my night wasn't over. As soon as I got in, I went straight to my computer and opened up a prize session. I had things to investigate. First, I created a class called Grant, which had a class variable named type, which returned Grant. I also defined a class method named type, which returned the value of the class variable. Then I created an award A class, which inherited from Grant and looked exactly the same as its parent class, except for the fact that the class variable type was set to A. So, based on what I'd seen earlier, if my suspicions were correct, then not only would award A type return A, but now Grant type would return A too. I was indeed correct. Unlike class instance variables, which have their own separate copy, no matter the inheritance chain, class variables seem to share a value amongst objects in a chain. Does it matter which direction I go in, I wondered. I had created a subclass and set a class variable with the same name there. What if I reopened Grant's superclass and set the class variable there too? I confirmed that Grant's superclass was object, and then reopened the object class, giving it the same class variables and class method as Grant and award A. So, object type returned object, and Grant type returned runtime error. Class variable type of Grant is overtaken by object. What about award A type? Exactly the same error, including the reference to Grant. Okay, so it looks like with class variables of the same name, there's definitely only one value shared in the inheritance chain, referred to from only one class in the chain. But you can only set them in one direction. If you reopen a superclass and define a class variable that's already been defined in any subclass, it raises a runtime error in those subclasses. I then wondered how far up the inheritance chain Ruby went looking for class variable definitions. I first confirmed that the highest class in Grant's inheritance chain was basic object, before reopening the class and giving it the same class variable and method, its type being basic, of course. Yep, looks like Ruby goes all the way up to basic object when dealing with class variables. Now, at this point, I had a lot in my head, and I don't know about how you all work, but I always find diagrams so helpful. So it was time to sketch out what I pieced together and see if it matched up with the behavior in Alex's code. First, I knew that in the C Ruby internals, for every Ruby class, there's a corresponding R class structure. This stores things like a table of the class's methods, its attribute names, and also a table of class instance variables. I assumed that there was another table for class variables. So if I took the grant class from Alex's code, we'd have an R class structure that looked like this, with an entry for award count in the class variables table. When the award classes were first defined, including the setting of a class variable with the same name, there were no problems initially. My prior session had indicated that Ruby journeyed up the entire inheritance chain, looking for the highest superclass that had the same class variable set there, and then overwrote the value. In Alex's code, all of the classes had the same initial value for award count, 0. But then, the scripts had started assigning awards, and this was where the behavior of class variables had started to cause issues. Every time an award of one type was assigned, the value of the award count class variable was incremented by 1. So after 50 lots of award A had been given out, it was the one and only stored value of the class variable on the grant class that was being updated. So after the first script had been run, when the scripts had been called, when they called award count on method A, it had correctly returned 50. But calling the same method on award B and C would have also yielded the same result, despite the fact that we'd not actually awarded any grants of type B or C yet. And then we had the script that awarded 30 lots of award B. And the one copy of the class variable gets incremented 30 more times. And by the time we award the final 20 lots of award C, we have this. So when the final redraw script was run, an award count was called on the grant class, which adds up the result of the same method on the 3 award types. 3 lots of 100 equals 300, which exactly matched the bug in Alex's code. I was feeling rather pleased with myself at having pieced this together, but I wanted someone a teeny bit wiser than I was to verify that I'd got it exactly right. Luckily, I knew just the person. Chapter 6. Despite the hour, I wasn't surprised that my contact replied straight away, saying she'd be up for jumping on a video call with me to talk about class variables. Who was I speaking to? Ellen. Now, who on earth is Ellen, some of you may be wondering. Ellen was 45, an experienced freelance developer who'd seen many things and who regularly brought what she'd learnt on her adventures to the Ruby codebase. I talk her through my diagrams, including the bug I had been dealing with, and the general picture I'd put together on how class variables worked. Did I get it right? I asked. Yes, except for one small thing, Ellen says. Class instance variables and class variables are actually stored in the same table in the R class structure. The extra @ symbol on class variables means that they don't get mixed up. Okay, cool, I say. But there's been something on my mind, Ellen. Class variables only seem to cause a lot of trouble. What are they good for? Well, says Ellen, they're really good for application configuration. In fact, your favorite framework, Rails, uses them extensively for that very thing. Okay, fine, but that's a whole framework. The everyday developer doesn't have to care about them, right? Well, says Ellen, let me tell you a story. You discovered today, during your investigations, that when accessing a class variable, Ruby will go up the whole inheritance chain, all the way up to basic object, in order to check which class was the highest to set the variable, right? Well, Eileen Uchital of the Rails core team and Aaron Patterson, who is on both the Rails and Ruby core teams, wanted to dig into this fact some more. The bug that you dealt with at the RIP today only featured an inheritance chain that was 2 levels deep. But Eileen and Aaron with their expert knowledge of Rails internals, knew that not only did Rails make extensive use of class variables, the inheritance chains there went a lot deeper. Surely, Rails' extensive use of class variables was incredibly inefficient and might be having a performance impact on Rails apps everywhere. Much more efficient would be if instead of going up the entire inheritance chain each time to check for the highest superclass within which a class variable was set, there was instead a cache. And so, that's what they built. With the cache, instead of Ruby checking every single class in the inheritance chain when trying to find the value of a class variable, the method points to a cache, which tells your code exactly where to look for the class variable setter. And after testing that there was indeed a performance improvement with this cache, Eileen and Aaron submitted a PR for Ruby that got merged in just the other day. Because these two took the time to understand how things worked under the hood and then developed this change, with Ruby 3.1, Rails apps can see a 6 to 7% request throughput performance increase. Now, why did I tell you this story? Ellen asks me. Well, people are always saying things like, Ruby is slow, Ruby doesn't scale, Ruby is dying. And I've had a lot of conversations with Eileen about this, and I know how she feels about it. And I feel the same. You see, if only more of us took the time to learn Ruby, really learn Ruby, and understand how it works under the hood, understand why it is the way it is, and get to grips with all of its quirks and gotchas, then we'd be able to spot pain points and opportunities for us to improve Ruby and make it faster, make it great for scaling apps, and so much more. If we spot things that we don't like about Ruby, or think something could be better, instead of complaining about it, we should be much more like Eileen and Aaron, investigating, experimenting, benchmarking, building, and fostering conversations in the community. We should be doing all of the things that'll help keep Ruby alive, make Ruby a no-brainer tool of choice for developers and organizations at all stages for decades to come. As with any conversation with Ellen, I left it feeling super inspired. There and then, I vowed that whenever I got time away from Storygraph, even though it wasn't often, I would continue striving to understand how Ruby behaved under the hood and do what extra I could to contribute to the amazing language and community.